What is going on, guys? Welcome back for another video. We are going to be going through the best 5 ways to tell if you are getting shredded. We're going to be counting them down, starting with the worst all the way up to the best. So everything you need to know on how to track your fat loss progress right here, right now. But before we do that, if you're enjoying the photo shoot prep series, all of these top tip videos, my day in the life vlogs, my physique updates, then do me a favor and go and hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I know everyone says it massively helps the channel grow and everything like that. I'll be honest with you, it makes me feel like I've not wasted my time putting these videos together, so that's always nice. So go and do that, and then let's jump straight in at the bottom with number 5. Fat loss tracking method number 5. None of these are bad, by the way. There is definitely a time and a place to use all of them, but at the bottom of the pile, the one that you probably want to pay the least amount of attention to on a regular basis is your clothing. These can be a great indicator that things are going in the right direction in the early stages of a fat loss plan. It's a really nice feeling to know that your shirts are fitting a little bit looser, you're fitting back into those pants a little bit easier. When you manage to scavenge the back of the wardrobe and find that old top that you've not worn for 2 or 3 years that you used to love, that now you're able to fit back into again, those are fantastic signs that things are going in the right direction, and they can be really, really motivating in the early to mid stages of a fat loss plan. There's nothing wrong with them. We don't want to discount them. They definitely can be super, super useful, but they are limited in how long they are going to be a useful way of you tracking fat loss, because after a certain amount of time, after you've lost a certain amount of weight and those tops are fitting you a little bit better and fitting you the way you want them to fit you, you're not going to see any real marked improvement on top of that, unless of course you have to start dropping down the t-shirt size or a pant size or anything like that. But putting that to one side for a second, once that top fits you, you're not going to be able to see underneath it if you're progressing anymore, because once it fits, it fits. And then if you're continuing to get a little bit leaner underneath over 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, you're probably not going to be able to tell that all too accurately underneath a piece of clothing. So it's very limited in how long it can be a good indicator that things are going in the right direction. So that's why it is down at number 5. It's still useful, but it's not going to be the most useful way of tracking your progress for the majority of your fat loss plan. So number 4, the 4th best way to track your fat loss progress is skin fold calipers. Now, if you're not quite sure what those are, I'll chuck them up around here. So these are basically very old school ways, pinching and tracking the amount of body fat that you're holding in certain areas. So you'll tend to do it on places like your abdomen, like your lower back and your upper back as well. This can be a really, really useful tool to give you a start point of a general gauge of where your current body fat percentage is, but it's never going to be 100% accurate. And actually, the areas that you might take that body fat reading from are going to be different from person to person. Everybody takes them slightly differently, which means everybody's going to get a slightly different reading. And then on top of that, you've got the chance of human error from reading to reading. So even though you might take it in the exact same sites each time, you might take it just slightly differently without realizing, meaning you might get a slight difference in those results. And then on top of that, we might only want to take them at most once a month as you're going through that process. Trying to take them every single week and seeing that number stay the same, it might actually have a bigger negative impact on your motivation and your mindset towards that fat loss plan than it will be being helpful for tracking it. So you'd only really want to take that measurement, like I said, once a month anyway. And then you've got to take those results with a pinch of salt. You should be able to see some consistent progress, some consistent drops in those numbers if you're doing things right. Don't take those numbers as gospel. And more than that, if your aim is to drop body fat because you're wanting to look leaner and you have a picture in your mind and you're wanting to look a certain way, you can see those differences in the mirror anyway. You don't really need to do a skin fold caliper to confirm that you are getting leaner in those areas, when you can probably just see that difference yourself. And this is why I don't really tend to do body fat percentage measurements with a lot of my clients, because they're not really that important. We can see if you're getting leaner or not. We can tell by other methods whether you're getting leaner or not. The actual body fat percentage, it is kind of irrelevant when it comes to wanting to look a certain way. So it can still be useful. It's good to give you a start point, and if you use it at set increments along the way, it can be interesting data to collect, but you've always got to take it with a pinch of salt, and it's not going to tell you anything that you probably can't already see in the mirror anyway, so it's not going to be anything groundbreaking. So that's why it's in at number 4. Okay, so on to number 3. Now, this is going to be a controversial one, and you're probably not going to be expecting this to be down as far as number 3, but in at number 3 for tracking your fat loss progress is your weight. Now, before you start getting all crazy and uppity and thinking, yeah, but Jake, I've always been told to track my weight if I'm losing body fat. I've always been told to make sure my weight's going down and should expect to see that weight drop. So why are you suddenly saying it's not the most important thing in the world? Calm down a second, take a breath, because I'll explain exactly why I've put this in at number 3. So I do track weight. It is still very, very useful. I get the majority of my clients to track their weight. But the reason that it is down at number 3, we are aiming to look a certain way. You want to drop body fat, not because you want to weigh a certain weight, but because you have a picture in your head of how you want to look, and that is not related to the scale. So we're always going to be more concerned about how you're looking in the mirror, not what the number on the scale is. The number on that scale is affected by so much. It is not a reliable marker for weight's gone down, that means I've dropped body fat. Weight's gone up, that means I've gained body fat. There is so much more going on a day-to-day basis that is going to cause that number to go up and down. And that is why we get these daily fluctuations in weight that can really freak you out, and it can sometimes leave you feeling like your plan's not working, your weight stayed the same for 3, 4, 5 days, maybe even gone up a little bit, and you feel like you need to change something or you need to scrap the plan altogether, when 9 times out of 10, it is just a case of these certain things that are causing a little bit of weight fluctuation or water retention over time will come straight back down. And when they do, that's when you tend to see the big drop in weight overnight that causes people to think they've suddenly lost 1-2 kilos of body fat overnight, when they haven't. They've been losing it consistently over the past 7 to 14 days, and it's just that they've had some water retention that's been masking it, and then all of a sudden that goes and you look tons leaner, and so all of a sudden that goes and weight comes crashing down. So when you're taking your weight, you need to take into account that fluctuations on a daily basis will happen and be caused by things like water intake the day before, the time that you ate your food the night before, how well you slept through that night, how much movement you did the day before, how much salt you took in the day before, how many carbohydrates you've eaten the day before. All these things will have a massive impact on what your weight is day to day. So don't get fixated on a certain number. If it changes a way that you didn't expect, ask yourself what you've done differently the day before. Because if, for example, you've had an extra 50 grams of carbs the day before, each gram of carb that we store is glycogen, we store an extra 3 grams of water. So for 50 grams of carbs, we've also got an extra 150 grams of water. That will up by 0.2 on the scale if everything else stays the same. And we can expect fluctuations in water weight by at least 1%, if not slightly more, on a day-to-day basis. It's completely normal. So you need to be mindful of all this when you're stepping on those scales. Now, when it comes to weighing in, there's a few things that you need to make sure you do to keep the readings as reliable as possible. So you need to make sure that you're weighing in at the same time every day. Preferably make sure it's first thing on the morning, after you've been to the toilet, before you've eaten or drunk anything, just stood in your underwear or a pair of shorts or something like that. And also make sure that the scales are in the exact same place when you use it, because putting the scales on different surfaces will cause a change in those readings. So if you can make sure that those conditions are the same, you can then have some sort of accuracy and reliability with the number that's then coming up on the scale. Still taking into account the fact that it's going to fluctuate every single day, and that is completely normal, regardless of how well your diet is going. So what can we do to overcome that then? You need to focus on a weekly average. What I get my clients to do is weigh in every single morning or a minimum of 3 days a week, and then we take an average weight for that week, and that is the number that we track week to week. So you should be able to see up here what that looks like on the sheets that I get my clients to fill in, and then we have a look at from week to week how your average weight is changing, because that is the more reliable number of what's going on and what your weight actually is from one week to the next. And then we might make some necessary adjustments to your nutrition plan or your training plan based off of the direction that average weight is going in. And lastly, on weight, it's important to mention body recomposition. So I have a ton of clients sometimes who come in and they'll start to drop body fat and they'll start to gain some muscle tissue, and over 6, 12, 18 weeks, their physique has drastically changed, but their weight hasn't moved all that much. We can see that they're visibly getting leaner, they're visibly getting more muscular, their training sessions are improving, they're feeling great. So why would we care what their weight says? All it means is that they're building muscle mass at a similar rate to what they're dropping body fat. So when that's the case, and that is what we term body recomposition, who cares what your weight is? So that is number 3, the scales. And now we are on to number 2, the penultimate method for tracking your fat loss progress, and it is measurements. Waist measurements, hip measurements, chest measurements. I try and use these with pretty much all of my clients because it is one of the most reliable ways that we can assess whether we're dropping body fat, whether we're getting leaner, and whether we're getting more muscular as well. These are nearly as good as it gets for tracking your progress. And we can pretty confidently say we're going through a fat loss process and all we had to go off was your weight and your measurements. And we saw that your weight was staying the same, but your hips and your waist were coming in by 5, 6, 7 centimeters, that your chest was going up, that your shoulders were getting wider. We can make a pretty safe assumption that you're going to be getting leaner and leaner and actually increasing your muscle mass as well. And that is why I'm such a big fan of measurements. Now, typically I'll get clients to track their waist, their hips, their chest, their arms and their legs. But if we can only do 3, waist, hips and chest tend to be the main 3 that I'll get them to track. We don't again need to do this every single week because we're probably not going to see tons of change week to week in the measurements. Maybe in the first sort of few weeks where you drop a load of water weight, you might see some drastic changes early on. So you don't need to be doing them all the time. You certainly don't need to be doing them any more than once a week. But again, you need to make sure that when you do take them, you take them at the same time every single week, under the same conditions. So first thing on the morning, before you've eaten, after you've been to the toilet, again without any clothing on that's going to affect the reading that you take. These give you a really clear indication of what direction it's going in. So number 2 is body measurements. And here we are down to number 1. We are down to what I think is the best way of tracking your fat loss progress. You've already probably guessed what it is because it's the only one that's not been mentioned yet, but I think it is. Number 1 is taking regular check-in pictures. It's as simple as that. Like I said throughout this video, if your goal is to look a certain way, then the best way to track whether you're making progress or not is to regularly see how you're looking. It doesn't get any more simple than that. There is nowhere to hide in front of a camera. Yes, lighting can make a massive difference to how you look, but if you standardize that across your pictures, am I getting leaner or am I not? So when it comes to your check-in pictures, and again, I'll throw up a few examples of my recent check-in pictures, you want to make sure that like when you take your weight, you're doing them first thing on the morning, before you've eaten anything, after you've been to the toilet, and you need to make sure that you're taking them in the exact same position, place in your house, lighting, every single week. Now, what I tell my clients to do is to put their phone on a windowsill somewhere in front of loads of natural light, put the camera onto a selfie, video themselves stood facing the camera, stood side on, stood with your back to the camera, and then once you film them, again, just in some comfortable clothing, it could be underwear, it could be shorts and a sports bra, whatever it is, you can then go through your video and you can screenshot those pictures, stood in those poses, and then you can compare them back to previous weeks and start to see where you're getting leaner. Because remember, when it comes to checking pictures, you're not going to look significantly different every single week. You're also not going to lose body fat evenly from everywhere every single week. Some weeks you might find that one body part looks leaner and another body part looks the same. That's completely normal, and you can use that information to inform whether you need to make any changes to your plan or not going forward. When it comes to checking pictures, a quick word of warning: nobody likes it. Nobody enjoys taking their check-in pictures. Nobody likes how they look in their check-in photos. 9 times out of 10 you're going to look half asleep because you're doing them first thing on the morning. If you can get yourself to a point where you're relatively happy with how you're looking check-in pictures, which are usually in lighting that is not very flattering, you can then be pretty sure that in nicer lighting you're going to look even better. So what I tell my guys is, if we can get you looking lean in your check-in pictures, when you walk into the gym, geez, you're going to be walking in and people are going to be turning their heads at how lean, how vascular you're looking. So don't worry if you don't like how you look in your check-in pictures. You don't need to. So that is number 1, taking your check-in pictures. And that is it. That is the 5 best ways to tell if you are getting shredded, from number 5 all the way down to number 1. So how can you go and use this? My best advice is to make sure you're doing pictures every 1 or 2 weeks, measurements every 1 or 2 weeks, and doing your daily weigh-ins and only focusing on the average trend week to week. If you want to look a certain way, pay attention to how you're looking. It's as simple as that. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something from it. Like I said at the start, if you did, make me feel like I'm not wasting my time making these, drop a like on the video, share it to your socials, subscribe to the channel, all that jazz. And with that being said, I will see you in the next video.